Early in today's trading session, Nasdaq dropped hard, and I was able to take a short position on Nas, profiting from this move, even though the overall direction for traders should be to look for Nas upside. This is called a counter trend trade, and in this video, I'm going to show you how I do this with assets like Nas consistently. I used to think that in order to catch a counter trend trade, all I had to do is look at price action, technical analysis, look for market structure, maybe a random break of support. But I'm going to show you real quick on the charts how this strategy, at least for me, never really worked. So if we take a look at Nas right here, I'm going to mark off a few areas, right? If I can see a break of support here on the lower time frame, and I can see another break of support here. We can see one right here, right? That little wick. So if you just start marking off these zones, even if I was to mark this one off here, another break of support, you can look at this one right here. This is the lower time frame, but that zone as well. Any of these areas that I just marked off, you can easily see how if you were to just try to counter trend trade Nas, if I was to take sells here, if I was to take sells here, any of these areas, they would all end up in a loss. Understanding this is exactly how I learned that taking counter trend trades doesn't work just by looking at technical analysis, which means if I see a break of support and I see a candle, right, and if I see a candle break support, this isn't a reason for me to take a sell position. I quickly learned that even though this might work once in a while for taking counter trend trades, I want consistency, right? I'm trying to stay in the markets for the long game. And I learned that doing it this way just isn't the way that was helping me stay a consistently profitable trader. And you can see that literally just by looking at the charts like we just did. Instead, I learned that if I want to win these counter trend trades consistently, I had to learn that there's a lot more driving the markets than what I understood. Really, it was a lot more than just looking at candlesticks and just trying to find random chart patterns. At first glance, it might seem unnecessary to learn this information for counter trend trading because when I show you this trade, you can see this is a very great entry and it's an easy sell to the downside. But remember, I took this trade live in front of hundreds of other traders, and it's the skill to know when to take the counter trend trade by understanding what we're going to talk about, because that's how we avoid all of these other fake outs that I had showed you earlier, right? Because that's where the real skill comes in and keeps me a profitable trader. Here's how I'm going to break down this trade. First, I'm going to touch on what Nasdaq is and how different things in the economy can impact it. Because if we don't even know what's moving Nasdaq, just buying or selling it really just becomes a guessing game. Then I'll break down the actual entry that I took using technical analysis. A lot of traders like to misunderstand when I say I don't only use technical analysis, and that makes them think that I don't use technical analysis at all. If anything, I still need technical analysis for my entries. It's just I like to include other factors which increase the probabilities to my trades. So we'll cover the actual entry and the technicals that I use to take that. And finally, I'll show you where I took profit, when I took profit, and I'll walk you through some of my thought process when it comes to when should I hold or when should I close counter trend trades. Sound good? Let's get right into it. So what is Nasdaq and what makes it move? Nasdaq, also known as Nas 100, is a list of some of the biggest companies in the US stock market, mostly in technology. Think of it like a scoreboard for companies like Apple, Tesla, Microsoft, and 97 other companies. Typically, when these companies do well, Nasdaq will go up. But when they do bad, Nasdaq will go down. Every 3 months, the companies release something called earnings reports, which is basically just a report card for the company. It shows us how much money the company made, how much money the company spent, and whether or not they ended in a profit or a loss. These 100 companies and their earnings reports are one of the first things that can move Nas. But the main part of my analysis, which made me confident that Nas was going to drop, was something called sentiment analysis, which is basically just like checking the mood of the market. Because believe it or not, the markets do have feelings. Because even though the majority of the markets is numbers, data, and based around logic, there are still events within the economy which can cause market fear or market optimism. And sentiment analysis helps traders determine whether the markets are in that fear mode or they're in like market optimism environment. This matters because Nas is what's called a risk asset. What this means is that when the markets are in an optimistic environment, right, there's market optimism, Nas will go up. But on the other hand, when there's market fear, Nasdaq will go down. Let's bring this full circle. When I learned how to use sentiment analysis to determine market optimism or market fear, I also learned how to use sentiment analysis to determine if Nas was going to go up or go down. This is what helped me take all of the guesswork out of my trading and take higher probability wins. This is how I was able to take the guesswork out of my trading. Instead of just jumping in buys or sells because I see a random candlestick pattern forming or maybe volumes coming into the markets, I learned how to apply proper analysis to my trades. This not only helped me avoid fake outs, but also increased the probability and the profitability of all of my trades. Now that we know what NAS 100 is and what makes it move, let's talk about how I use that information to apply it to my technical analysis to take this trade. For my technical analysis, I only really use three things. Number one, I use price action, which is basically just reading the strength and weakness of candlesticks, right? I'll explain that when we get a little deeper into the trade. Number two, I like to use support and resistance. This is just, some people call it supply and demand. It's simple technical analysis. And then we have market structure, which is just understanding where I am in the bigger picture. So this here is where we were right before the New York Stock Exchange opened for Nasdaq. Let's go to the 30-minute, we can see a really nice consolidation zone, right? So I was actually trading this live, and what I was telling everybody on the live call is I do want to take buys on NAS because I'm still bullish on it. So if I can get a break here, I'm doing it. But the area where I will look for sells and change my bias will be this support here. Now, the reason for that is when the stock exchange opens, there's typically a ton of volume. So now what happens sometimes is even if I got that break of support here, I'm still looking for buys, and I need to be careful for something like this. I don't want to take sells here impulsively, and then if it flips on me aggressively, I'm just going to take an unnecessary loss. I'm going to close out, and then I'm going to take buys. So what I would prefer to do is I'm going to wait. If it does break this area, I'm going to watch how it reacts to this area, and then I'll look for sells here, right? So we'll go to the lower time frame because I did take this entry on the 5-minute time frame. So here's what happened at market open. We had this first candle right here. If you see how it formed, obviously you're not watching this in real time, but what happened is the first wick came down and then it flipped up aggressively. So because I'm bullish on NAS and because we were sitting at a support, I actually, when this flipped, as soon as it pushed up, I entered buys. And then when it hit this order block, like the top of this resistance, and failed to break, I went break even on the trade because we haven't broken out, and I'm okay taking buys. This is not the sell trade, right? I'm okay taking this first trade because, and it's impulsively, because I'm bullish on NAS and there's a lot of volume. So one of my criteria for that, completely different topic. It's something I like to do. In terms of the sells, if we play this out a little more, right? With the next candle, immediately down to support. Now, I already said before, I'm okay missing these sells because I'm still bullish on NAS. Now, in real time, you don't know that this candle is going to drop that quickly because the stock exchange opens. It's still very risky to me to be taking even sells with that candle closure because I'm still overall holding support and going to be looking for buys. Now, when I was more comfortable taking sells is when price action developed a little more, right? So if I move this forward one more, we had this candle, which this actually made me think we might hold this support, and this is going to be the area for buys. But a couple things started happening. I'm still being patient. I'm not looking to do anything too crazy here in terms of taking entries. And then the next candle does this. Now this one, my entry was, I'll show you where it was. I'll show you what was going on in the markets and why I took it. I entered impulsively on the open candle right here, and I put my stops above here. So, well, generally it was around this area, but it was above here. Now, when I took this trade, I was able to determine what I was saying before was called a risk-off market, right? Market fear. So I'll show you the TP after, but when I took this trade, there were a couple other things going on. I always look at this chart for Nasdaq because, like I told you, remember, Nasdaq is a list of the top 100 companies. So this is a chart where I look at the top 8. Now, the top 8 always changes. I just have to stay on top of it. And this is the chart that I use to do that. If you look at the time on the bottom, right, this is the exact same time, Monday, February 25th. No, I'm sorry, Monday, February 24th, 2025. You can see down here, exact same time that I was taking that trade. So I'm always watching these tech stocks at the same time as I'm looking to trade NAS because I want to see a correlation between them. So take a look at what not all of them, but the majority of these companies were doing. If I were to circle the same time when I was entering those sells, right? Look at NVIDIA. Now, the only one that wasn't dropping at the time was Apple. But you can see when I took the entry, it was actually doing this pullback. So it looked like it was going to drop, right? You can see down here, it was at 930. So that still wasn't too bad for me. Look at, we have Meta, which is Facebook. We have Tesla. We have Broadcom. These are all top 8. Microsoft was dropping. Amazon was dropping. So all of these, Google too, right? It was pushing up early in the session here. But you can see the time, that was when New York opened. And then when the stock exchange opened, everything dropped. So combining the fact where we had the drop here in tech stocks, also I'm seeing the drop of support, and I didn't do it up here because to me, entering up here on NAS was still too risky. Also, I was just showing you like the tech stocks, not everything was dropping. Not yet. Look here on NVIDIA. If you see in the bottom, it was at 935. The first 5 minutes, we were actually pushing up. That's why I took those buys that I was talking about. But unfortunately, it didn't hold. But fortunately, I also went break even, so I protected myself. This was the entry here. And that's why I took it. And that's how one of the ways that I was able to identify that we were in a risk off market. And I had high confidence that NAS was going to drop. But now that I'm in the trade and it's moving in profit, how do I manage the trade? When do I close it? When do I take profit? Well, first off, this trade was only taken based on sentiment analysis, and it goes against my overall bias on NAS, right? I actually believe NAS is going to go higher for the long term. So because of that, this trade that I'm taking, I'm not going to be holding it, or I'm not planning to hold it for a long time, meaning all day or even a swing trade, which just means holding a trade for multiple days. So basically, even though I'm in these sells, I'm actually looking to wait for reversals because I want to take buys and follow NAS in the right direction. As I'm in this trade right here, the next candle immediately drops to the next support area, right? This is when I close the trade. So I actually closed a little earlier. I closed somewhere around here because I was still looking to see in real time, it was actually reacting, looked like it was going to flip. I wanted to take buys, but I ended up closing around this area and it blasted to the downside, which was great. But like I said, I wasn't looking for this to be a long-term trade. I'm happy with this profit, not a big deal. Now, a different way that I could have managed the trade is I would just mark up zones. This is a support area. This is a support area, potential TP down here, right? Now, if we play this out, it actually came quite a bit further down. Look how much farther down, a couple things here, right? Look how much further down NAS came. How could I have caught all of that, even though I believe this is a short-term move against the overall bias? Well, number one, what I would do is I would just identify some of these zones. And number one, I would go break even when it hits the first area. And then I have two options really, depending on what size position you're in on these trades. If it hits the next area, I'm going to either start trailing my stop loss, right? I'll move it here. I'll move it here. So that way I'm locking in profits, but I'm not closing the trade because I don't know how much further it's going to drop. Now, the second thing I can do, which honestly I'm a really big fan of, is I start taking partial profits when it hits certain zones. So this was really fast. I closed early. I didn't take any partial profits, but it's always good to consider like how else can you manage the trade? Taking partial profits or trailing your stop loss in order to lock in profits, or just close the whole trade if you're okay with that. I'm okay with closing the trade if it moves down further because I have so much experience with NAS that I see it reverse quickly. And proof, case in point, right here. If we play this out, look how fast NAS recovered so many of these candles after it hit support, right? To watch something like this in real time, where you get that rejection and the next candle immediately shoots up, if you're in a trade here, you just lost 50% of the trade, right? So when it hits those zones, I'm either trailing my stop loss, I'm taking partials, or I'm closing the entire thing when it hits a certain area. The opposite would be true if I took buys here. Because I'm long-term bullish on NAS, I'm still probably going to go break even when it starts getting away from my entry, but I'm just holding the trade because I want to take NAS buys long-term based on my fundamental analysis, which means understanding what really drives NAS and how it works in the economy. I can take these short-term trades against the bias, but the long-term trades I want to hold. When I learned how to use sentiment analysis, it completely changed my trading. I went from just kind of guessing on when to buy to sell to now having more tools in my toolbox. And as you can see, helping me understand the direction of the market, especially things like NAS, a lot deeper. And this trade on NAS is a perfect example because I was able to identify that the markets were in what's called fear mode. And I had a very, very strong, confidence that NAS was going to drop. This helps me avoid taking all those fake outs that I was showing you earlier. I actually took this trade live with my trading community in front of hundreds of other traders who are also able to capitalize on the exact same trade and profit from the same move by following my analysis and my trade. If you want to be one of those traders, if you want to trade with us, join our live sessions. I will put the link in the description below, and I'll see you guys in the next video.